This is your brain on risk. This is Mind Over Money, the podcast where Kevin Cook exposes the psychology of investing.
Welcome back to Mind Over Money. I'm Kevin Cook, your field guide and storyteller for the fascinating arena of behavioral economics. Last week, we explored the hyperspeed of change coming from exponential technologies. Even though I've been talking and writing about these exponential technologies for a year now since we started the podcast last November, I feel in many ways that we've barely scratched the surface. If you had asked me a year ago what the biggest disruptor was going to be over the next 5 to 10 years, I would have said artificial intelligence and all the different things it can do, deep learning in autonomous cars, to how it aids the life sciences and biotech. And then it's just going to become infused in so many things. Remember, I quoted a guy from NVIDIA saying that, there's going to be two types of people 10 years from now. Those who understand how AI is all around them and infused in everything, every consumer experience they have in their home, car, online, whatever, and those who think that it's all just magic. Well, so AI is obviously bringing incredible change. But I've spent the last 2 months learning as much as I can about two other fields that weren't even on my radar 2 years ago: Bitcoin and gene editing. And so that's why I'm sort of pitting them against each other today and asking which is the bigger disruptor. And it's just amazing that, if you ask anybody from either of those two fields, what they think is coming, they'll tell you that, this is going to change the world. This is going to revolutionize medicine in the case of gene editing, or money and finance in the case of Bitcoin. And now, before you think I've turned a podcast about behavioral economics into the Exponential Technologies podcast, let me assure you we are still talking about both economics and behavior, because nothing changes economics or behavior like a disruptive technology. Just look back at history. So my theme today is to take these two disruptive fields and explore just what they could change in the next 5 to 10 years that will make the world almost unrecognizable to your grandparents or even your parents' generation. We'll start with Bitcoin and blockchain, as the price of the so-called digital gold surged above $10,000 last night. And we got some big volatility in it today, too, as I speak to you here on November 29th, Wednesday afternoon. But first, a fresh artificial intelligence resource for you. I've spoken much about the historical insight and prophetic warnings of Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli historian, via his book Homo Deus. Today, Dr. Harari posted a new documentary on his website titled Talking About a Revolution: Life in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. Here's how it's described. What impact will the artificial intelligence revolution have on our society, culture, and economy? In this video, produced for the JD Discovery Conference, Professor Yuval Noah Harari considers one of the greatest shifts since life began on Earth: natural selection being replaced by intelligent design as the principal force of evolution. I posted the link on Twitter this morning at Kevin B. Cook, and I'll also put the link in the article that accompanies this podcast on Zacks.com. All right, now let's talk about this crazy mania going on in Bitcoin. Why is it surging above $10,000, more than doubling in a few weeks? That's right, on November 11th, it dipped below $6,000. I think it went as low as $5,500, and today it has it's gotten as high as almost $11,500. Hedge fund manager Mike Novogratz would sum it up in just 4 words: the herd is coming. He's been saying that for at least a few months, and what he means is that people and bankers are starting to catch on that there is something real and significant about these technologies. We've covered Bitcoin and blockchain twice here this month, so you can look back for those podcasts, I think on the 8th and the 15th. And I speculated that Bitcoin could go to $20,000 next year as more financial institutions adopt aspects of this new asset class. And that's really the way it's being looked at. Not everyone agrees, but it's definitely a technology that didn't exist 10 years ago. and it's attracting a lot of investment dollars and attention. So, who are some of the institutions we've talked about? Well, there's J.P. Morgan, who created a blockchain platform around the Ethereum protocol. And then there's CME Group planning to launch a futures contract on Bitcoin in December, which, they're just providing price discovery and risk management for institutions who are starting to deal in these various forms of the cryptocurrencies. But I didn't even understand blockchain and Bitcoin well enough to invest in it even 2 weeks ago. Then I did some more homework and I began to dabble. And whenever I do that, my learning curve really ramps up. Then I start doing my due diligence. So, as I was preparing my notes for this podcast this morning, my idea was I wanted to warn anyone considering a Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency investment to pay attention to the volatility and know that there's a lot of risk here, and you only want to use money that you are prepared to part with forever. This new asset class, if I can call it that, is inviting all kinds of wild speculation, both in terms of what's theoretically possible with the technology and in terms of what price the other guy will pay for it. Because, that's how Wall Street works, or how any investing works, is you're always buying because you think the next guy is going to pay more for it down the road, whether that's 5 minutes down the road or 5 years down the road. But let me tell you about volatility. In the hour before I just walked in to record this podcast, the price of Bitcoin dropped from $10,400 to $8,600 in about 40 minutes between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern. That's what can happen when lots of new money rushes in and holders, older holders take their profits. You can imagine the newly minted and overly exuberant crypto investors who scrambled to buy on the move above $10,000 last night or this morning, believing that this cryptocurrency could only go higher, and then they're selling in a panic below $9,000. In the stock market, that's what we call FOMO, F-O-M-O, which stands for fear of missing out. Very common. So, and remember, last week I shared a hilarious tweet about what people will be talking about this Thanksgiving. And, it changes every year from a technology standpoint. And this year's Thanksgiving query was, how do I buy a Bitcoin? Well, in all actuality, the rally really did get going since we talked about that right before Thanksgiving, because many thousands of new accounts were opened at these exchanges like Coinbase. And so everybody and their grandma decided they wanted to buy some Bitcoin. My concern is, where is the wild speculation coming from? What is it that people think is possible and probable with Bitcoin that would make them invest thousands of dollars without any fundamental analysis, or any what we call due diligence? Well, actually, that sounds a lot like what investors do in the stock market every week. So no surprise there. It's not just greed. It's not just that people want to get rich. They want to be part of something, so they, it's a crowd mentality. One of the oldest books about stock market manias is called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, I think. But people want to feel that they're not, it's not just they're missing out on the potential to make money, but that they're missing out on some kind of revolution. And that's what makes them do crazy stuff. So what is, legitimate that makes, a reasonable person who's maybe done some homework and sees the future of Bitcoin, what makes them pay $10,000 for a Bitcoin when there's not a whole lot backing it? Well, there's legitimate things like J.P. Morgan starting this blockchain platform based on the Ethereum protocol. Ethereum is one of the cryptocurrencies. And because Ethereum it has many use cases for blockchain, and one of those uses is smart contracts, which is a type of secure way of storing and transferring assets, that can be specifically programmed. So it's everything about Bitcoin and the blockchain is about what can be programmed, and have that kind of precision that you can have with computer code, and also the security that you can have using cryptography. So that's, we talked a couple weeks ago about the DLT, distributed ledger technology, where transactions and value can be confirmed by many thousands of computers at once. So that's a distributed ledger. So a lot of value there. And you're going to see, companies move into this, whether it's Walmart or Amazon, Microsoft and IBM are certainly working on it. I saw a headline a couple weeks ago, not even a couple weeks ago, American Express announced that they're going to be using a crypto called Ripple for instant transfers of financial payments around the globe. So many uses here for blockchain. So that sort of legitimizes why people think that, I want to, as Mark Andreessen calls Bitcoin, he likened it to your membership, your seat on the stock exchange to be able to conduct transfers on a blockchain. Now, and maybe, Bitcoin is the one. Especially, the rumor was not a rumor. Actually, Amazon bought 3 domain names around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. And they haven't announced that they're starting any businesses there, but they wanted to own those domain names. So you can imagine if they all of a sudden announce that they're going to be accepting Bitcoin for some types of transactions. That would certainly increase the interest. Now I want to mention 4 thinkers in this space who also tend, I don't want to say that they hype Bitcoin, but the way they think and the way they talk and the research and writing they do lends itself towards people getting very excited and exuberant about the potential. I mean, John McAfee, the security expert, guy basically invented cybersecurity software in the whole field. He has often said things like, Bitcoin can go to $100,000, it can go to $500,000. Now, this is a guy who believes in the libertarian aspects of what the blockchain and Bitcoin are, and so he would like it to see that happen. And what's involved with that is a threat to the banking system, because if right now we need banks as intermediaries to hold our money and move our money, and a guy like McAfee wants to eliminate that and have peer-to-peer transactions. That's the whole idea of Bitcoin. That was in the title of the paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009. Peer-to-peer transfers with that are secure, private, et cetera, et cetera. So this is sort of the thinking of these people. There's another gentleman from Australia named Craig Wright, and same. He will talk about the same things: the libertarian aspects, peer-to-peer, decentralization, eliminate the intermediary, eliminate the banks, the fees, that sort of thing. And then there's another gentleman from Germany, I believe, or I know he's European, but I think he's in Berlin right now, so I'm not really sure. His name is Rick, and I'm just going to spell his last name, Falkvinge. Not sure how to pronounce it, Falkvinge. And he is also a big proponent of the power of Bitcoin for liberating people. And we talked a couple weeks ago about, hey, Zimbabwe having their own political crisis and currency crisis made Bitcoin go to 13,000 because, in terms of the exchange rate that people had to get out of the Zimbabwe currency and get into something that they believed in, and if they could do it with an internet connection, they wanted to buy Bitcoin. One more gentleman I want to mention that's in the news a lot talking about Bitcoin is Tom Lee. He used to be a equity strategist with J.P. Morgan not too long ago, and he now is the strategist for a firm called Fundstrat. And Tom Lee has been very vocal. He's on CNBC a lot. And after Bitcoin went through sort of an identity crisis in the middle of November, where they had to decide were they going to change the code and have something called a fork, where they basically split off and there would be a new Bitcoin. That's what took it down below 6,000. He said once that cleansing happened, he upped his target for the end of the year for Bitcoin to 11,500. So all these guys are being watched by lots of different thinkers and traders and investors, and you think, well, these are the smartest minds in the field of cryptocurrencies, and so we pay attention to them. So when Tom Lee says, hey, we could go to 11,500 by the end of the year, or actually maybe that was his mid I think that was his early to mid 2018 target was 11,500. He's being a little bit conservative, but we just about got there. We got to 11,400. this morning. But here's the other part of Tom Lee's analysis, and this guy is a respected economic mind. He's looking at, okay, what do we do with gold now, and how do we value gold, and how many millions, billions of ounces, and what trillions of dollars of value do we put on gold? Well, he says that cryptos for the younger generation that doesn't believe in gold, most people under 40 are not gold investors. They're digital investors, and so they believe in this crypto idea that as money moves into Bitcoin, it could become 5% of the value of gold. And that number for him was $25,000 per Bitcoin. And he thinks that could happen in 5 years. I think it could happen in 2 years. I mean, my target for next year for Bitcoin is $20,000 just on pure speculative mania. Now, I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and buy Bitcoin based on that. I'm just saying that this is the type, this is what's driving this. So I just wanted to recap some of that stuff. If you want to learn more, you can find these guys on YouTube, McAfee, Craig Wright, spelled W-R-I-G-H-T, and Tom Lee, of course. Also go on the JPM Quorum site and learn what Quorum is, as this Ethereum platform with smart contracts, and how they're, the banks don't want to ignore crypto, and they're obviously not. And more exchanges want to have Bitcoin futures. So many institutions are doing their homework, and they're going to be involved here somehow. And so it will change the banking system. If you listen to the extreme libertarians, and you find these guys on YouTube, they think that this technology can eliminate the banks, or at least eliminate the need for them. I don't think the banks are going to let that happen. And so it'll be a slow process, but finance will be revolutionized, and this thing that just was invented in 2009 called Bitcoin, and subsequently the platform, the distributed ledger technology that we call blockchain, it will disrupt finance, and things will look very different 5 to 10 years from now. All right, I will be back and talk about our second technology, the gene editing and CRISPR. I want to do some follow-up. Last week we talked a lot about Jennifer Doudna, and I want to share some new resources, stuff I've just, great stuff I've learned in the past week there that you definitely want to follow up on, because that's the other technology that is going to change the world and disrupt medicine and disrupt, for that sake, politics, law. These institutions, like in terms of culture and economics and law, are going to be changed by a revolutionary technology that gives physicians, scientists the power of God, so to speak. All right, I will be back faster than you can tell me what CRISPR stands for. All right, we're back talking about the other revolutionary exponential technology that is going to change the world in the next 5 to 10 years, and that is CRISPR, which stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, which we dove into a little bit last week. It's deep science. I mean, it's for biochemists and microbiologists. And it takes several of them. We talked about the two women who are most responsible for collaborating and making CRISPR become a technology for what we call gene editing, and that was Dr. Jennifer Doudna and Dr. Emmanuel Charpentier. So what I wanted to follow up with this week, what I didn't mention is that the Cassandra, in this case, Jennifer Doudna, who's warning about the power of CRISPR and gene editing, and how it could be misused in the wrong hands. She actually published a book in June, and the name of her book is A Crack in Creation: Gene Editing and the Unthinkable Power to Control Evolution. Now, I still don't have my hands on the book yet. I plan to probably this week. I've been just catching up on other stuff like Bitcoin. And finishing the book Warnings by Richard Clark and R.P. Eddy. I read some pieces of that last week, and this is where this is why I'm calling Jennifer Doudna Cassandra, because that's what they call her. They wrote the book Warnings, Finding Cassandras to Stop Catastrophes. They wanted to. That was our podcast last week with her. These guys are finding experts who can warn us about, specific aspects of the field that they work in, things that they see, whether it's, with artificial intelligence, climate science, cyber security. So these guys interviewed her, talked to her probably in 2015, 2016, before she even published her book and probably was working on it. But she'd already been speaking out and trying to raise awareness about the potential dangers of gene editing and CRISPR and how it could be misused. Because the power of CRISPR is, this is what Doudna helped discover, a versatile, flexible, and easy-to-use technology to do different forms of gene editing. And so what she became concerned about was, where it could be misused in other parts of the world, because this kind of science and technology can change hands fast. Once the research papers are written, then scientists all over the world are trying to duplicate what can be done and doing their own experiments. So the one thing that always scared Doudna, she said, was that she would wake up one morning and see and read about the first CRISPR baby, where somebody had, genetically modified and designed, so to speak, a child. So those are some of the things that she's been warning about. Now, if you go on YouTube, if you don't rush out and buy her book, A Crack in Creation, I highly suggest just going on YouTube and finding some of her videos. Now, if I just type, her last name is Doudna, Doudna, and you'll see some of the top results are definitely ones you want to pick. There's a 16-minute video where she's at UC Berkeley, where she was a professor and basically achieved this work. And that video is titled Genome Engineering with CRISPR-Cas9. Cas9 is the name of the protein. I think Cas9 just stands for CRISPR-associated. So it's the CRISPR-associated 9 protein that is used in CRISPR gene editing. And then I know she was at a talk, see if I can find it here. She was at a talk recently where even before she published her book, or her book was just out, and there's like an hour-long interview with her. So a lot of good stuff to find on YouTube where you can see her speaking. And again, like the first one I mentioned, just that 16-minute video, you see her standing in front of an image of the double helix DNA, and that's just educational, just explaining this is how CRISPR works, and it's so great to hear it from her. So I was writing for my Healthcare Innovators portfolio here at Zacks, where we own the company Editas Medicine, symbol EDIT. We own that stock because I believe that, I want to have some access to this CRISPR technology, and this is one of the best ways to get it. Doudna was a founding partner of a company, I believe, called Caribou Biosciences, which became Edit, but then she sold her rights or whatever to the science, and then she allied with Emmanuel Charpentier, who founded the company CRISPR, CRISPR Therapeutics, and the stock symbol there is CRSP. Now, so they discovered the technology together. Then there was a patent dispute between University of California, Berkeley, and the Broad Institute because basically the scientists at the Broad Institute went and did an experiment with a different application of CRISPR and then filed for their patent first. So, this has been a 3-year saga here with in court with patent battles. And let me just read this summary here, which can explain it much better than me off the top of my head. This is from frontlinegenomics.com. UC Berkeley and the Broad Institute have been involved in a patent dispute since early 2015, which primarily concerns the use of the CRISPR-Cas system in eukaryotic cells. In 2012, Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier became the first people to adapt CRISPR for use in gene editing of prokaryotic cells, for which they later filed a patent. Prior to their patent being approved, Fen Zhang and his team at the Broad Institute adapted the CRISPR system for use in eukaryotic cells and filed their own corresponding patent application. As they chose to use expedited approval Their patent was approved before UC Berkeley's, and I believe that that's held up twice now in subsequent appeals. But that's not, so there's that battle, but then, the larger conversation here, and the one that you want to pay attention to Jennifer Doudna about, is the worries about the technology being misused. It's almost irrelevant who has the patent now. The technology is out there, and we could have companies, we could have researchers in Asia, in Europe, and elsewhere using the technology and creating, some sort of massive change for a plant, an animal. And, you can think of concerns where if they're creating viruses for the specific purpose of research, and those viruses are dangerous and, have new genetic structure, what if those somehow make it out of a lab? So there are concerns not even about, maldeeds, but about just plain old accidents, just like with any advanced biotechnology. So let me read a little bit from Warnings by Richard Clark and R.P. Eddy, where they're in the chapter about Jennifer Doudna and her as the Cassandra of biology, about gene editing. And they're talking about, this section is titled From Germs to the Germline. So there's one aspect where you're dealing with editing something in a disease in a specific person, or if you're making it a heritable trait. So here they are. Another serious concern arises from what are known as off-target events. After its discovery, researchers found that the CRISPR-Cas9 complex sometimes bonds to and cuts the target DNA at unintended locations. Particularly when dealing with human cells, they found that sometimes as many as 5 nucleotides were mismatched between the guide and the target DNA. What might the consequences be if a DNA segment is improperly cut and put back together? What sorts of effects could this cause, both immediately and further down the road, for heritable traits? Experimenting with plants or mouse bacteria in a controlled laboratory environment is one thing, but what is the acceptable level of error if and when researchers begin experimenting with a tool that cuts up a person's DNA? If an error is in fact made, is there any potential way to fix the mistake? There are also important considerations about the types of cells that are genetically modified. Genetic modification could one day be used to treat disease in an organism's somatic or body cells, but those somatic genetic edits would remain only with that single individual, passing away with its death, and would not affect future generations. Using CRISPR to treat a woman suffering from tyrosinemia, for example, would genetically modify her liver cells, but her children, should she later become pregnant, would lack the improved gene. However, CRISPR can also modify the DNA of a fertilized egg or embryo. As its cells divide and mature into a fully formed human being, every cell, including those that might one day be used for reproduction, will contain a copy of that modified DNA. Such germline modifications mean that any changes would be passed on to that individual's offspring, becoming a part of the broader human genome. All right, and that was from Warnings by Richard Clark and R.P. Eddy. So Jennifer Doudna looks at lots of different pathways that CRISPR could be misused or abused, but it's not going away because there are so many good things that can be done with it. And it's going to change medicine because there are many companies right now that focus on a specific genetic disease, whether it's something to do with multiple sclerosis or some organ diseases of the muscle, and gene editing could almost could revolutionize the treatment and cure of some of those diseases. So if this takes off the way some people think it could really eliminate the need for a lot of other companies that just create treatments for certain diseases and may or may not cure them. So that's where there's a lot of good coming for people in the sense of let's take care of a genetic disease. Can we treat it at the level of its cause and prevent it? And so that will propel CRISPR and gene editing forward regardless of, anybody's concerns. So, and that's why Jennifer Doudna realized that she saw it was going forward with or without her, and that's why she felt the need to speak out and talk about some of the potential problems. I mused the other day that, even as recently as 2014, she was enjoying the success. This was, they published their paper, I believe, in 2012, and, she was still, high on the excitement of what she discovered. And this was the girl who, when she was 12 years old, her father gave her a copy of the book, The Double Helix by James Watson, and she became entranced by DNA and all the power it held. And so here she is, to go on to basically advance the science faster than anyone thought possible. And she never, she says, even as recently as 2014, she said, "I've never experienced anything like the pace of discovery before in my life." And she was talking about the flurry of experimentation flowing from the discovery after they published their paper. But, something changed for her by 2016. Or I should probably say something evolved. She began speaking about the dangers of something that was so versatile and so powerful. I became familiar with her work from the book Warnings, but the YouTube videos by themselves that you can find on her are fantastic. When I sort of sum up what she's accomplished in 40 years, it's it must be at once amazing and daunting to be Jennifer Doudna, because here's somebody who comes into biology hoping to make a contribution, and then she creates something with such massive power that's that's going to not only change medicine, but the temptation is there for people to use it in ways we can't even imagine, creating. And I think in the Warnings book, these guys open with a scenario of super soldiers that that are created by gene editing. So yeah, that's exactly what they do. They paint a little vignette of a world of super soldiers created by gene editing. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to learn, and this is definitely one of the most powerful technologies that they've come up with in the life sciences, or for that matter, in any technology. So it's just something you want to spend a lot more time learning about if you can. It's hard to be involved in the debate or know if the expert you see on TV is steering you the right way unless you understand a little bit more about it. So I'll put links to the best YouTube videos to watch with Jennifer Doudna and others. I'll put them in the article that goes with this podcast on Zax.com. And make sure you follow me on Twitter too, at Kevin B. Cook, because I'm always updating this kind of stuff there. All right, thanks for joining me, and we will talk to you next month.